So I've been teaching here at General Assembly since about 2015, both remotely and in person. And primarily I was teaching digital marketing courses during the first half of my career here at General Assembly. Now during the back half, I'm teaching more biz dev and entrepreneurship classes. And then beyond that, I'm a business development consultant. So that normally involves helping other entrepreneurs build their brand and revenue and helping them automate a lot of the tasks that drain their time, energy, and talent. And I also write for Entrepreneur Magazine, which is a lot of fun because I get to interview some of the brightest people in business and then try out some of the best practices on myself. And if it actually works, I pass it on to people just like you. Also have 3 kids, which might become apparent if you hear them running around in the background. But I think during COVID, we all learned that everyone has their own unique environments. And me living in Brooklyn, you're probably going to hear some sirens eventually as well. But outside of that, let me just talk to you about General Assembly. And someone took a long time to write a really good introduction here, so I'm going to read it off the screen, not to botch it. GA is a global reskilling company that helps employers thrive amidst rapid digital transformation by closing the digital skills gap among their existing employees and building up their internal talent pool of skilled tech professionals. And we also help companies build up their local and external talent pipelines of new and diverse tech talent. We do this through our accelerated, expert-led accelerators and workshops that blend quality teaching, coaching, and hands-on practice with asynchronous self-paced learning. That hands-on practice, that's really important to call out here because I've taught at other organizations before, other colleges, and I'm surprised at how many organizations and educational institutions don't give you hands-on practice. People have been shocked when I'm like, okay, let's start pushing some buttons. So that's the benefit of GA is you actually get to get your hands dirty in regards to the tools and the tactics that you're learning. So we specialize in the most in-demand skills related to digital capabilities across data, artificial intelligence, software development, digital marketing, and general digital fluency. So with that, what I'm also going to do here is introduce our panelists. We have Roxanne Ang, sorry. And Roxanne is the head of beauty tech, consumer tech, and education of the Digital Transformation Office at the Shiseido Group. And Roxanne is responsible for the strategic development and delivery of innovations and technology that enables consumer engagement in the digital age. As the head of education, Roxanne is also responsible for driving change in people and organization as part of their digital transformation journey. And we also have Matt Tumbleson. Matt is also an instructor here at General Assembly, right? So we got 2 of us here. And Matt's an entrepreneur in residence at Procter & Gamble, right? Pretty cool. And before that, he was the CMO of Rappi, the $5 billion food delivery powerhouse in Latin America, as well as the VP of marketing at Grubhub, right? So a lot of stuff going on with food here. Matt was also the co-founder of Techist. Matt, correct me if I'm wrong on that pronunciation later. That's a software company that enables brands like Disney, ESPN, Lyft, and Verizon to handle customer service by text messaging. So first of all, thank you, both of you, for being here today. I'm looking forward to this chat. All right, let's get into some questions. And before I do, realize you can ask questions too. Some of you already found the Q&A window, so please do ask questions as I'm going around this. We're gonna save 20 minutes or so at the end to do so. And also, any of your key takeaways, please do jot those down. We'd love for you to share those on social media at General Assembly, that we can all crowdsource some of our main takeaways from today. But let me get into my questions. First one is this. So obviously last year has been a wild ride for marketers as consumer behaviors were constantly shifting. So Matt, on your end, how did you and your team stay updated on those changing consumer behaviors? And then Roxanne, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well after.
Yeah, so when COVID first started, that's when I was actually at Rappi, which is food delivery. And as you can imagine, taking the entire world, everything is shut down. As a marketer, we were kind of, scared of what we're going to do, what we can say. However, there was a real opportunity at the same time to provide a value to consumers who were stuck at home. And finding them was a little bit easier because we knew exactly where they were. So things like geo-targeting was fairly easy. For us, the biggest struggle was actually around the constantly changing nature of, is this city in lockdown? Are they not? Is it insensitive to try and capitalize and acquire users at the same time that we're trying to just bring them food and groceries? And so on the one hand, our business grew. On the other, it became incredibly difficult to market, and just the sensitivities and whatnot. So we leveraged search data almost exclusively to tell us what's going on in each of our 9 countries that we were in, to tell us it's a good time. People are looking for this. We need to show up and be there for them. And so we really leveraged our partnership with Google and the data that they provided us to kind of know in real time what was happening.
Yeah, that's super smart because I saw so many brands as they were advertising, they seemed tone deaf. I'm like, do you not realize there's a pandemic going on? And they're like, hey, live your best life. It's like, I can't leave my apartment, you know? So I think you taking the time to learn about consumer behaviors and these shifts and then deploy empathy is what I'm also hearing in your marketing is a good way to stand out by saying, hey, look, we hear you, we understand you, and we're here to support you. Cool.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, in the beauty industry, I would purport to say that that shift had actually happened. It's just that what COVID had done was to accelerate this in a way that is unfathomable in terms of speed. And just keeping your ears on the ground as we kind of kept watch, you know, through all the analytics that has been set up in place. So, you know, just quick background, Shiseido had been undergoing a digital transformation journey for maybe the last 5 years at this point, maybe 6. And so in the last 5, 6 years, we've been really just kind of like building out a infrastructure that is appropriate for a digital era. And so, you know, by the time we were kind of like ending that chapter of digital transformation, moving on to the next chapter, i.e. the intermediate chapter, when COVID hit, it almost was like, hey, guys, we're ready. But hang on a second, to the question of like manpower, labor, you know, employees, if you will, are they ready for all the infrastructure that's built? And it's a classic digital transformation story, right? Because at the end of the day, digital transformation is people powered. And so your people kind of like have to know how to use the infrastructure, use the knowledge that's available to you, i.e., you know, what are we hearing? Where's the shift happening? People are gaming more, but, you know, what do we do as a result? Where were the networks that we have built to say, hey, gaming companies, we're in this boat with you. How can we collaborate? So, you know, to answer your question directly, you know, I run the Shiseido Plus Digital Academy, which is really that you know, people powered, get your people ready part of digital transformation. And as part of L&D, my team also produces thought leadership. So you can imagine at the start of the pandemic, we were busy because every CEO in their office were calling to say, well, what's happening here? Da, da, da. And then it really does take a village, right? You work with your sales, your marketing team, everyone's got a pulse on the marketplace. How do you take all this data and triangulate here are the opportunities, here's where we're gonna see risk. How do we handle the supply chain part of it to ensure that there's continuity when it comes to the flow of business, you know, and then just really seeing the shift between, well, no one's going to be wearing lipstick anymore or perfumes, right? The shift to skincare and how we manage the inventory really was a day by day, week by week kind of situation. So I would say that, you know, the idea of being data driven into the digital age cannot be underscored enough. And I would say that keeping your ears on that ground per the data pulses that a company might subscribe to, be it large or small, is going to be one of those key things.
And you made a good point when you mentioned, hey, people aren't going to be wearing lipstick or perfume as much. So what can we do? Like going back to what Matt said, like what's the opportunity in the crisis? And I think that's really bright. So if you're looking for search trend data on makeup versus skin cream, you're like, hey, well, here's where the audience is going. And I think that's great. But you have a big emphasis on people, which I appreciate, because often companies think, hey, if we have more tools, we're going to be better. It's like, no, you need the right people who have the curiosity to, you know, explore these tools and just the internal knowledge of your company as well as your audience to deploy them. So like tools alone aren't going to help you if you don't know how to use them properly and have the right inputs going into them. So you did give me some more background on your role, and what I'd love to do is just kind of dig a bit deeper in regards to the actual skills that your team has developed over the years and just the impact that's had on you.
Yeah, so by the way, I just want to add to that, it's not even like the curiosity, right? It's the courage to actually tread into a place that is unknown to you. How many marketers do I know sort of gets digital, but not really? You know, they understand search engine marketing to a certain extent, but to understand the nuance of it and how to like really harness that to do it well is a whole different story altogether. So I'm sorry, your question was what again?
Just in regards to some of the skills that your team's developed over the last couple of years.
Yeah, so just for sake of context, you know, my team is solely responsible for driving digital transformation. And so there are many, you know, I consider the largest Shiseido group around the world our team. And so the focus is really on, you know, I don't want to say it's the 44,000 employees around the world, but certainly there are segments of population that might be priority, if you will. And we've chosen to truly focus on both leadership and marketers. Marketers, sales and marketing really is really where the rubber hits the road, right? Like, you know, we often talk about the consumer decision journey, and in beauty, the consumer decision journey is not linear, right? It is multi-channel, it is channel agnostic, and also, you know, most of all, it is omni-channel, and it always starts with digital. And so, you know, the skills as it relates to sales and marketing actually doesn't even begin with skills first. It begins with digital literacy. You know, and we've written a bunch of white papers, and I would say that one of the central theses of one of our white papers, besides the fact that digital transformation is people powered, is the fact that in this era, digital literacy is like the ABCs of and the 1, 2, 3s, if you will, of like a career. And so, you know, what do I really mean by that is understanding what on earth is the cloud, you know, what is API, you know, how does search really work, and so on and so forth. Like those are just some of the fundamental things, because if you don't understand that, it's difficult to make good business decisions. So from there, you know, we've spent an incredible amount of time and energies on ensuring that there is a common digital literacy amongst our employees so that we can all kind of function off the same language and understanding. Look, it's not always a perfect situation, but suffice to say, there is a common platform that we work off. Then from there, it's sort of going, okay, functionally, this is what you do. What are the skills you need to have? And I would say that, you know, I'm a strategist by nature. And so, you know, even coming off how do we transform our workforce? The roles and functions that we have today, or, you know, a couple years ago, is not even right for tomorrow, right? So doing that work then lends us into the skills bit, then becomes that story. The other facet of this is, you know, not necessarily upskilling the leadership, but helping leadership understand that digital transformation is truly the work of everybody and not just the work of marketers, even though the focus now is on marketers. Because when you have all the leaders aligned in terms of, oh, I see this is possible, and here's what I need to know as a leader as well. I may not have those skills, but I recognize the skills is necessary for us to push forward in acquisition, retention, whatever it might be per your category is going to be important. So I don't have a straight answer for you in this, but the approach with which we think about it is going to be different from departments to departments and from brands to brands.
You made some really good points there too. The last one I heard was, you know, leadership has to understand what digital transformation is, not beyond the buzzword, right? Because like, oh yeah, we need this. Mike, go do it. Kelly, go do it. Like, that's not going to help, right? You have to understand like the fundamental impact of it and how to hire the right people who embrace that approach. And you said something else that I really appreciate, which is it's not just the curiosity, it's the courage to say, like, I don't know how to do this. And you also mentioned terminology. You have to say, like, I don't know what that means. I still don't know what an NFT means, right? So, I mean, I'm behind on some of these things too. But if you have that culture where it's okay to say, look, I don't know, you're going to make much more impact, because then someone's skill is not limited due to the fact that they're missing some of the fundamentals, right? You can't get to, you know, these high functioning skills if you can't get the fundamentals down, if you don't know what an NFT is or a pixel or whatever. So yeah, I think that was super bright.
I want to add to that too, because I have not heard it referenced as courage. It's always been the curiosity, and I'm like, yeah, I need people to be curious, but I need them to go and do. And one of the things that I've been actively looking for is entrepreneurship. And I just call it a side hustle, you know, like who's willing to start a side hustle? If we can upskill them enough here that they're able to go and do a side hustle, then we've achieved something here internally. You know, they can do end to end, feel comfortable, learn, have the skills to be able to keep growing. And I want to be so good at upskilling the teams internally that they're willing to go and create almost like a PayPal mafia, you know, like after leaving us. So that's something that I've been really focused on lately, is just all the skills needed for them to go and leave us, but obviously stay with us because it's a great place to work.
Yeah, and actually on that note, I would say that, you know, equally important to skills is culture. You know, different companies have different culture, but I cannot underscore like that is like one of the most important things, because when those values don't exist, then digital transformation is going to be hard. And when I kind of like think about what are the elements of culture that's necessary for us to kind of like move forward successfully, becomes the transformative work of like the company as a whole. And actually at Shiseido, what was actually very helpful is that we have this thing called Trust 8, and Trust 8 is this, you know, set of values and culture that we have every employee embrace. Things like, you know, one of them would be like take risks, right? I mean, when you think about digital culture, it could not be more real than to like just have to take the risk, because there's so much unknown and things changes, you know, on the fly. And I would say that, you know, cultivating that culture, you know, having that courage, for example, the curiosity, collaboration is another one of them, you know, to know that, look, this is my scope. And most people are like, this is what I do, I don't know anything else. Like, that's got to go away. And so if you talk to a lot of like HR professionals, and I'm not an HR professional by nature, right? But when you look at enough of those thought leadership and literature, the idea of a T skills employee as opposed to an I skills employee really just, you know, starts forming today in terms of like the desirability of a talent, if you will. I can scale across the board, but I can go deep in one of my expertise situations. And that's oftentimes, I would say, you know, the DNA that we're looking for in terms of, you know, what you have, and then also like how we can kind of like help them understand the spectrum of, you know, what is coordinated to work well within digital.
I love it. And that's actually a great segue to my next question in regards to upskilling. I'm going to read this one off the screen because I don't want to botch it, but we recently held a webinar that focused on the digital talent forecast, which is based on research by General Assembly and produced together with MZ Burning Glass. So we talked about how skill-heavy job descriptions are nowadays, which is frustrating, and raised opinions around why it's important to spot talent and potential versus assessing a suitability based on a checklist box exercise. So Matt, on your end, I know you do a lot of hiring. So what is your approach, you know, that you take when hiring or training someone that you're currently involved with? And when you're thinking about, you know, evaluating someone, like, can they check a box? Or do they have the ability to go ahead and learn these skills and the willingness?
Yeah, good question. And it's, you know, at least within the P&G ecosystem, if you think of our company, it's been around for, you know, 100+ years. We have a very, very rigorous interview process that finds amazing brand directors and has created some you know, really talented entrepreneurs. Today, however, if we just take that same job description and put it on the internet, and we say, hey, we're actually trying to get someone with digital skills with that same job description, it's going to be really difficult. And so there's a few things that are kind of changing the way that we're looking for talent. And you know, think of something like even myself, you know, as an entrepreneur in residence, like that's not a real role that existed. That's something that a connection, you know, was made, and there was a need and a desire for the company to identify that, to go through a process that's abnormal, to then bring someone in. So the company has a you know, recognized need for that type of skill. Now that I'm there, I get to disrupt things and do things in a different way. So for me, when I'm looking for, you know, all of the different digital skills, I'm able to ask the questions. I'm able to have the kind of free-flowing conversation about the different types of things that I would with, you know, any of my colleagues, you know, who are also digital experts, to really understand if they have those, versus the traditional HR might really look for other things like cultural fit, which is incredibly important, especially for us. But it's not necessarily going to dive into the skills that are hands-on keyboard, especially we're used to kind of outsourcing those things to agencies. So as we think of the internal need, we have to rethink what we're doing. So it's a lot of getting to know people, a lot of personal conversation, and then obviously you can always ask someone to show their work. But if you can talk the talk pretty well, you know, and most digital things we're able to see and share, we can really kind of find those people. And of the thousands of people who apply to certain roles, surprisingly, very few do have those skills today. I'm kind of surprised at how few of them do, kind of knowing what the role entails. So having those conversations and getting to know them has really helped us kind of identify the specific ones that we're looking for and bring them in.
You know, it goes back to Roxanne's part about courage too, because as you're applying, if you just straight up say like, I have no idea how to do this, you're not trying to dance around the conversation, right? And that's going to develop more trust with whoever's interviewing you. I remember when I got a job at Facebook, I had never run a Facebook ad in my life. I'm like, sounds like a cool platform, but I had no idea how to use it. And they were looking for people that were just, had the ability to do so based on some of their background and curiosity and to your point, courage. And then Matt, as you're talking, it reminded me of this book called Competing Against Luck by Clayton Christensen. And he talks about how larger organizations like P&G need entrepreneurs, people that are curious to find new ways of solving unique problems as opposed to using their experience, which involves going backwards all the time. And he mentioned that if these larger companies don't have entrepreneurs who, to your point, also might have a side hustle, they won't be able to innovate as quickly as smaller companies. So having those people that have that entrepreneurial mindset is super important, but you also want to give them the freedom to do so without saying, oh, you can't do this or we'll fire you, right? Because one of my buddies, Jason Pfeiffer, who's the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine, he straight up says any company that doesn't allow their stars to have side hustles, you could potentially lose your stars, or they're going to be frustrated because you're not letting them express another form of their curiosity and creativity, which could spill over to their 9-to-5 job as well. So,
and there's a book called Super Founder that actually did a lot of kind of like data analysis of what makes successful startups, which I think they had said was it wasn't unicorns, but it was, at least Series C and above. And one of the common threads was that they had started a business before. And so it's funny that we're talking about digital and digital marketing and upskilling, but that courage to go and learn on their own, for me, is one of the best indicators that this person, even if they don't know, if they're willing to say they don't know it, they're going to find a way to kind of get that information. And that's where like a general assembly is so incredible, because they can say, hey, we've got these experts, we've got these people who are looking for this information, let's make the connection. And let's give them that opportunity. They could go and learn on YouTube videos. It's not the same as having experts, who are actually able to be there and show them exactly and how it could apply to their role. And that for me is one of the biggest kind of drivers for choosing like a general assembly, because it's the experts, it's the hands-on keyboard, and it's the people who really are looking for that information and just bridging all of those together.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think another good thing about GA is the experts are practitioners. So when I was teaching digital marketing classes originally, I would just talk about my day half the time. I'm like, here's what happened today. And it'll be relevant to the topic, obviously, but it wasn't like I was going through a script that someone gave me and, just talked off slides. But speaking of scripts, I'm going to read another question here. Roxanne, so you're obviously a client of GA. And I'm wondering, would you be able to tell us how GA is supporting your work and your teams with upskilling initiatives and what challenges this work is solving? So what does success look like to you?
Yeah, by the way, can you guys still see me? Because my Zoom is acting a little strange and I'm not seeing anybody, but I see that the camera is still on. So I just want to.
We see you.
Good.
Okay, perfect. All right.
There's one challenge we solved for you. There you go.
Thank you. So, I mentioned earlier that, there was just no way that we can go out the gate to just kind of upskill 44,000 employees. It's just like not feasible. So strategy is all about choices. And we choose to focus, first of all, on up knowledge, right, which is your fundamental digital literacy. But then when it comes to the skills, sales and marketing really are is key to the next level of transformation. And so, one of the, and I am a fan of GA, given that, I have spent some time at GA myself as part of corporate. And, one of the, I think, more outstanding programs out there is the CM1 course, Certified Marketer course. Foundationally, marketing has become such a monster, if you will, when it comes to, a disciplinary approach. And I would say that, the P&Gs of marketers of the world, like they were notoriously fabulous, right? But from 20 years ago to where we are today, things are quite different. And so, but there are just some basic level items that remains the same from a skills perspective that we expect everyone to know, but they don't necessarily teach it in school, nor necessarily in MBA classes, right? So what GA has done, and I thought that, was wonderful, is the fact that just kind of like crystallizing what are some of the fundamentals, a true blue marketer needs to have on a foundational level before they can like move on out to like expertise level. So things like insights, understanding MarTech, marketing channels, and so on and so forth became key. And CM1, I would say that, you know, we did a pilot this year with GA where we rolled out around the world just to get a pulse check on, you know, is this something that, you know, that has done well for our employees. And I would say like the results, actually, I just saw them, has been pretty good in the sense that, you know, it helped to round out the skills, the skill gaps, if you will, that say, for example, somebody who's just like been knee deep in media, you know, don't necessarily have when it comes to, I'm making this up, like insights. And to round that off when it comes to insights and creative is really going to like kind of like take them on to the next level to have meaningful conversations with their team. And we all know that in the digital age, right, you know, collaborating, launching a project is not one of sequential events. It is one where we get together, we agile it. And I often use this analogy. Remember the college days, right? When you sat in coffee houses and there's like 5 people around the table and you just kind of like brainstorm, okay, we got to hand this in by X date, who does what and how. That's how we need to continue to function. You know, it's not what we knew in the big corporate world, but it's what we need to get back to, which is the root of like, you know, teamwork. And so CM1 as a course for our marketers, you know, is hopefully going to be able to like take them to that level of, I know what you're talking about, and I think I am anticipating X from you. I'm going to do what I have to do to help us all get to, you know, point B collectively, you know, without go, oh my God, we didn't think about X, Y, or Z, or whatever it might be. So that's how it's been working out for us.
You make a really good point in regards to CM1, like this more or less assessment of your digital marketing, we'll say savvy and understanding of different platforms. Because I think for people that are newer, it's like, okay, here's where you need to develop. But for someone who's more of an expert, it's going to reveal blind spots and opportunities. So when I took CM1, I realized I don't know that much about display, right? Other things I'm really good at, but I was like, wow, that's a blind spot. So if I'm a leader, I would think, how can I effectively lead a team that does display when I don't even know what, you know, CPM means or something like that? So I think even if you are an expert, it's a good way to make sure that you're aware of what your team's doing and that you're up to date with best practices on different platforms.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, sorry, just to add, like, and in my role, right, in a leadership role, I mean, oftentimes, you know, I tend to hire people who have the DNA. Look, it's great to have the skills and the experience, but the DNA to me is the most important thing, because every day, you know, we are learning. And oftentimes, you know, I'll have team members coming up to me to say, I have this problem. You know, how do I solve this? It's my job as the leader to say, let's think about this in like, you know, this way or that way. But before I could even go down that path with them, I kind of need to know foundationally, what are some of the facets of marketing that they're not thinking about that, you know, I can kind of illuminate on. So it's interesting you bring that up too, because as part of this pilot, rather than open it up to the entire marketing community, which we expect to do, you know, soon enough, is we actually opened that up to, you know, senior leaders and even like high potential, like mid-level leaders, right? Not necessarily to test them per se, but just to get that take from them to say, what do you think about, you know, this for your peers, but also would you have your team members, you know, everyone that you're kind of like managing do this program. And so that's kind of how it strategically started. And I do agree with you. I think like rounding out the foundational skills, you know, is important. I mean, I have been in marketing for a good part of my career. And, you know, I'll be the first to say that I didn't go to business school. So it's not as if I have been schooled in a certain way when it comes to marketing. Everything that I've learned is on the job and from just, you know, the gift of Google, if you will.
Yeah, well, I went to business school and I graduated in 2005. So a lot of stuff's outdated anyways. Like back then, marketing was, hey, get the back page of the phone book if you can, like that. That's really what it was. So, I mean, during my time teaching at General Assembly and just in my career in general, I've seen a lot of shifts in regards to what marketing is. And when I think about the future of marketing, I'd love to get your opinion here as well. I think about personalization, right? So when I was at Adobe, since they had access to so many tools and audiences, we could show you an ad and then based on your response, show you a different ad with a different color shirt, different copy, so on and so forth, based on some machine learning and how you're likely to respond. So across different platforms, different people, different channels, so on and so forth. And I think personalization is huge. Even things like with Facebook, with like dynamic product ads, you know, just showing you exactly what you've seen before. Retargeting ads in general, the more personalized I think we can get, the better, even when it comes to email. So on my end, I think that's really what it is. It's personalization, and it's also management of data. Because if you look at all the updates with iOS over the last year or so, with iOS 14, 14.5, and 5, we're losing a lot of data that enables that personalization, which is challenging. It's one that we need to solve for through third-party vendors or some workarounds. But I just wonder if you could just paint a picture from your perspective. You know, what do you think are the future skills that we should all be thinking about, if not deploying already?
Yeah, that's a super good question. I mean, look, every category, every industry is going to have those required skills that is, you know, there's going to be nuance to them. And I think it all starts with the consumer decision journey, be you a B2B business or a B2C business, right? Like, how does your end consumer, you know, begin and end with you in terms of like all the way to retention and loyalty? In the case of beauty, when it comes to, you know, when it comes to like the specific skills that we have and the future of those skills, I would say that data is going to be one of those key things, data literacy. You know, I think that there is an assumption that we all get data because we sort of like did that in school, right? Like, who doesn't really get data? But truly, when you talk to a lot of people, there's either a fear of data or a, you know what, I don't know what big data is, and I'm not, like, I can crunch some numbers for you in Excel and it ends there. But democratization of data as it relates to how a company can deliver to your marketers as the end users to say, ooh, I have a pile of, you know, not to be cliche, but like oil here, right? How do I process this to like get us to this Narnia or this apex of personalization, such that we can increase, you know, the lifetime value of the consumer? I think that those skills, as it relates to personalization, begins with having data literacy, but secondarily also understanding how MarTech actually works. Back to digital literacy again. I'm not saying that everyone should learn to code, but at the very minimum, understand information systems. You know, I think that that is something that schools are starting to pay attention to, but I can guarantee you that you can never get a fresh grad out of school, you know, where they kind of like know and understand how this works, which is why I think companies like General Assembly exist, right? Because you're filling in the gaps that the schools are not really teaching. Would it help to know, you know, how to code and how, you know, I don't know, cloud architecture, distributed architecture work? Absolutely, because then you can start having meaningful conversations with your engineers, right, or your operations people to say, hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z with this consumer segment. And I know that, you know, this particular product that we bought in the cloud, you know, it's not capable of this. Could we potentially integrate this with, you know, I'm making this up, like a third-party service that is API led? I mean, even to have that conversation requires that bit of knowledge / skills, whatever you want to call it. A marketer isn't going to go in to actually do that work, but that conversation, you know, to have that vocabulary so that the engineer understands you will be great. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, it would be great if the engineer understands marketing, but I think first and foremost, the marketer's objective is to get to point B. So you kind of like have to flex what you know, your language, and how you see things can work from a process standpoint to really get to the end of it. So a lot is being demanded of marketers these days, I would have to say, but it would definitely behoove every marketer, first of all, to have the skill for learning, and that in itself is a skill. What you absorb, how you absorb, and where you can go find, you know, to learn what the next thing is out there.
Yeah, and Matt, I want to get your take on this too. And one thing you said that really stood out to me was just knowing what data is available. Not saying I know how to like do like a join in SaaS or whatever, but just knowing like, hey, we have data here, we have data there. Can we join together to get some information? And then knowing how to communicate that as clearly as possible to the team that does it, because if you sound confusing, they're going to be confused, and you're either going to get nothing or the wrong thing back. So I think just knowing how to communicate what you're looking for is super important. But Matt, I'd love to get your take on this as well.
Yeah, on those conversations, like the capability to discuss an API, for example. If people don't know how to do that, it suddenly becomes, instead of one meeting that's productive, it becomes 5 meetings with a lot of other people. And it's really basic to think about it that way, but like, what does that mean? That it piles up, it's longer, it's 2 years before we accomplish something that could have taken us a week or two. And now our competitors are in the space that we're not, and or our consumers are not getting the value of our products. And that's more time that, you know, our own internal kind of hangups and processes are in the way, when what we're trying to do is really just benefit that you know, end user consumer as quickly as possible. And so from my standpoint with data, I try to create some urgency with my teams as much as possible, so that they understand it's not just, well, this is how we do it. It's how many days is it that this consumer is without one of our solutions for a pain point that they have. So let's figure out how to shorten that as much as possible. And oftentimes that comes in the form of upskilling and education and learning, and just figuring those things out as quickly as possible. So let's not get in the way of ourselves, you know, doing that. When it comes to data, I think that we've gone through these phases where at first it was like, we need all the data, and then we have too much data, and then let's hire a data scientist, and then all the data scientists quit and all went to Amazon and Google. And now we're going, okay, so what are we left with? We've got these piles of data. Suddenly cookies and you know, other streams that we were, you know, planning on having are starting to go away. And we're seeing larger trends away from our ability to take data for ourselves, and moving towards consumers' ability to kind of hold their own data and be empowered with that, which is forcing us as marketers to do better. We can't just hack the system and say, well, we are going to follow you around until we're so annoying that you buy this product. Instead, it's, who are the creators that you really like? Why don't you tell us, and we'll make this content for you, or we'll watch your behavior in a not so creepy way to deliver some kind of value to you. And so trying to understand value to a consumer, I think, is the best use of data. And as we're kind of being forced to move towards that, as we move away from cookies and tracking and things like that, reevaluating what our relationship looks like with our consumers and doing good with the data, and letting them kind of lead that. And secondarily, the kind of decentralization of everything, you know, that we're kind of starting to think about. Think of a world where consumers will hold on to their own data, and we have to pay them for access to that, which ultimately would be cheaper on acquisition costs. If I just said, hey, instead of going through media, I'm going to just find this person, you know, pay you a little bit of money, maybe in the form of a discount for kind of volunteering that, and then we have an exchange. So I think just kind of rethinking all of it, almost as if from scratch, is an activity that everybody should do and should be able to do, should have the skill set and comfort to say, what would this look like? So they need to know the current systems, they need to know what's available out there and what consumers are thinking, and then kind of bridge those two.
Yeah,
that's super. Good.
Sorry, I just want to chime in real quick. I mean, Matt, I completely agree with you on, you know, I shorten it to this. There's so many ways to skin a cat, right? And ultimately, what you know is exactly the way you're going to choose to skin it. And if what you know, or for example, what you understand is, I'm making this up, like monolithic architecture, right? When it comes to like, you know, infrastructure, then in your head, integration will take like, you know, maybe like 6 months, versus if is a open architecture, which has been in existence for the like last decade at this point. And if you actually knew about that, right, integration is a matter of like, I'm making this up, 3 weeks. So that works. But then also, Terry, just to address your question on communications, I cannot underscore how important that is. I mean, that is a true, you know, classic like skills everybody should have, digital age or not. And I think it's even more apparent today in digital age because you know, I mean, I was just reviewing a technical document, and it was clearly not written by a technical person, but it was somebody who's just kind of like fallen into the role, you know, and this was an outside vendor, fallen into the role, and it's a startup, so it's very typical, right? And just trying to like write specs. And I was just like, oh my God, my marketers can't understand this. My tech people probably can't understand this either. And I'm trying to decipher, what are you really asking us for in order to integrate something of that nature? And there in itself becomes that, you know, common vocabulary that becomes really key when it comes to skills. Or is it really about literacy? It's not even skills at this point, it's about up knowledge. And I tend to use the term up knowledge a lot because it's kind of like, I expect talent to have this fundamental knowledge if you want to thrive in the digital age, and no one can get away from it, really.
Yeah, that's a great lead into speaking about the CM1 assessment, which people are asking about in the chat. So I'm going to read verbatim what it is. The Certified Marketer Level 1 Assessment, CM1, developed with the Marketing Standards Board. So General Assembly has a marketing standard board of experts in the industry that just give their input on what they're looking for in their current employees and future hires. So it's all up to date. CM1 is used globally to gauge marketers' capabilities against the industry standard. Top scorers qualify for the exclusive CM1 credential, which I would definitely put on my LinkedIn and other areas that see a good fit, such as your resume. Participants receive a personal score report that details their performance and identifies opportunities for growth. And again, mine identified I am not good at display marketing. So if you want more information about that, we can definitely send it to you, but it's a good way just to level set, especially if you're not as digital savvy as you could be, but you're hiring people that are, you want to have some kind of way to level set. But let's go deeper into the whole part of upskilling. And I want to grab this one last question before we do hop into the ones that are already in there. But we often talk about the ROI of upscaling, or what I call the COI, the cost of inaction, meaning what happens if you do nothing. And I wonder how you think about this, because many organizations realize the value, but they're unsure as to whether it's the right time to make such investments. So what are your thoughts on that when someone's like, look, I know there's this benefit, but I'm just kind of on the fence. Like, what advice would you give that person, or what input do you have on that?
So the cost of inaction is kind of what I was talking about in terms of, if we are consumer centric and it's about the consumer and we recognize a pain point that they have, it's on us to get the solution to them as quickly as possible and not let ourselves get in our way. And for years, I always used Blockbuster as the example. Netflix kind of, beat them to innovation and then scaled. What really made Blockbuster go under was their own internal processes. And I learned this the hard way by saying, oh, it was Netflix. And then someone in one of my programs actually came up to me and said, hey, I was at Blockbuster when this was happening. And it was, well, we only do 5-year contracts. If you want to do this process, here's how it works. And Netflix didn't have any of that. So they were able to move fast. And so the cost of inaction is almost always a greater pain to the business than you think it's going to be. And it's not just we can leave things as is and we think that we'll just another year or two. It needs to be an ongoing thing where we are upskilling forever. This isn't like a do it once and it's done. We need to continually be as good as we can be to show up for our consumers. And the reason why is that consumers are constantly having better experiences in their lives. The Amazons of the world, like one-click checkout, that is now the bar that consumers expect across the board. So every time a consumer has a better experience, it's on us from a marketing standpoint, a product standpoint, whatever it may be, to show up better and to basically say, we believe that we can provide you as good, if not better value. So the cost of inaction is creating an environment where competitors can easily beat you because they understand the consumer and they put the consumer first. And whatever that may be for your business, I don't want to say it's the end of times, but it is, you will begin to lose and then continue to lose. And it's almost impossible to regain from there when you are last. So if you are a leading company like I was at Rappi and even with P&G, to maintain that, it requires continual improvement, and it's not something that we just can do once and stop.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, just to be clear, Terry, so in the work that I have to do, because, I'm in an environment of a legendary legacy company that's, almost 150 years old. So there's much that has to really be transforming. And in the work that I have to do to explain to management why this is important, but also why digital culture adoption is also important as well. I've found some great resources between McKinsey, Bain, and Korn Ferry, who are actually able to quantify quantify the impact of not paying attention to people from an upskilling and cultural perspective when it comes to transformation. So I don't have I just remember these were the 3 companies that I looked up and actually referenced, but also Satya Nadella, much has been written about his management skills at Microsoft, right? Like that in itself is classic to just show between culture and skills, we need to continuously improve. I mean, it's kind of like agile and scrumming it, when it comes to software development, it's never done. There's always going to be something that someone else wants. So when it comes to, investing in our talent pool. First and foremost, Shiseido has always been very upfront about the kind of company that we are. And fundamentally, we are people first company. I mean, we're also very consumer centric. I would say like pretty much people and consumers are really kind of like on equal footing here. And when it comes to, you know, putting our money where our mouth is it, you know, ultimately, it really just kind of like makes us take a step back to say, you're never going to get the perfect employee checking off all the boxes, as you had mentioned earlier. But there are employees who have institutional knowledge. There are employees who, you know, understands beauty the way no person on the street, you know, would be able to understand it unless you've spent time at Shiseido and the way we've done things, right? And so all those are actually value that we shouldn't ever, you know, throw away. But what is it that we can do as part of this community that we are, right? Company, community, call it what you will. This group of people who are here for, you know, one purpose, which to make the, you know, which is, I know this sounds cliched, but truly our company's mission is to make the world a better place, you know, through beauty. And so understanding that the world will always be changing, right? There's no permanence in life. But there is permanence in the knowledge that our talent has acquired, but also the DNA that you brought in. You've decided to hire somebody because you saw potential in them. And like I said, the schools don't train them well. So it is up to the second home of the employees, our talent pool, you know, to really kind of care for them in a way that is going to help nurture them into the future of their career. So that's pretty much how we think about it. Have we ever calculated, you know, in hard numbers, the ROI for all the investments that we've made through the Shiseido Plus Digital Academy? No, we haven't. But have we been able to kind of like do a pulse check and develop indices to show if an employee actually felt good about it? Absolutely. And what we've seen is that employees are grateful that this even exists with no conditions really, because we trust in you, you trust in us, and this is how we're going to function off this unspoken contract of our relationship between company and employee. But you know, most importantly, just to be able to take that skills and knowledge that we kind of like, you know, kind of given them to, now it's up to leadership management to take those skills that, you know, their team have learned to put them on a project that will help manifest. And so that's the other part of the game is one thing to be learning through a book, you know, online learning and what have you, but how does this really come to life in actual projects is exactly the other half of the equation that needs to be addressed from a management level, which is why that leadership part is going to be very important as well.
Awesome. So we have 8 minutes and 3 questions. We're going to just kind of rapid fire just to make sure we get through all of them. So Matt, on your end is a great question from Laura. How do you create a culture of learning in your organization? So how do you overcome the fact that marketers are extremely busy, good point, and prioritize everything else over learning? Laura, you sound just like everyone I worked with at Adobe. Yeah, it's tough when you have clients beating you down and you're saying, oh, you know, I have to learn this new skill. So how do you create that culture of learning and innovation?
So that culture, I believe, starts at the top. And when I was at, well, I'll start with Seamless and Grubhub in New York and Chicago. Our leadership firmly believed in continuing education and giving us the ability to go and learn and create almost like a university type setting where you will learn. By the time you leave here, you will have learned way more than what you came in with. And that's kind of stuck with me. And obviously, like General Assembly, I think has a really good culture of that as well, like both on the internal and obviously like from the mission. Then I went to a Rappi, which was essentially all very, very junior people. I had about 800 marketers who had almost no experience. You know, on day one, it was like, I have a degree in biology, but I'm here because I'm really interested to learn. And they were so attracted, and we needed people at the time. This was at the beginning of COVID. And so they inherently wanted to learn. And what I was able to do was to teach and listen to what they needed to kind of continue that so that they didn't go somewhere else. I kind of, gave them what they needed. At P&G, I mean, our leadership is absolutely incredible. We have something called Signal every year where they bring in some of the top minds of the world to just kind of talk about all different aspects of consumer life. And the fact that those types of things exist and they're willing to invest in that just is like an indicator of the type of company that it is. Now, what they teach and what people want to learn and what people need to learn don't always line up because a once a year program, you know, by the time it's done is already outdated, you know, and it's great for the general organization, but getting much narrower and more specific on the hands-on keyboard skills is what we call them, is going to require, you know, some kind of an external help for us. So we have a pretty good culture. What I've been instituting is the urgency. And as I said, you know, just the sooner we get there, the sooner we deliver, you know, amazing solutions to our consumers' pain points. And that urgency has shown up in just something very practical of setting deadlines. Instead of saying, we're not sure when, we say, what would this look like if we did it by November? And what would need to be true? What would this look like? What would we have to do? What don't we know? What do we know? Let's start planning. And just by implementing some of those tactics has kind of created I'm going to go and figure this out, or I'm going to figure out where I could go to get that information as quickly as possible. So that's one way that I've kind of accelerated it recently, is just through accountability and setting up, you know, we need to know everything by this day. What does that look like? What do we have to do?
Yeah, I like the focus on just moving fast. And that was, again, like the culture of Facebook is move fast and break things. So you have to have that courage to say, look, I might mess up, but if we sit around waiting for the perfect time, we're gonna be waiting too long. And Matt made a great point before, like if you fall behind, it's hard to catch up again, because if you're not seen as a leader, it's hard to attract top talent, right? You want to be where the top talent is if you want to grow in your career. And yes, it's great to have this training you can get as well, but you want to be around people that can help you with that as well. So super important to make sure that you're providing that value to people, not just to keep your current employees happy, but to attract new ones as well. And we have time for one last question here, because I want to make sure that we respect everyone's time, but kind of building on the point on courage. And if you can both give like a 1.5 minute response to that. You know, courage is related to business risks. How do you embed in your company the risk-taking culture at a senior and junior levels?
Yeah, I can take that. You know, ultimately it boils down to change management, a very underappreciated art and science, but a very necessary discipline, especially in digital transformation. I would say that encouraging the taking risk bit is really by example of leaders, but also talking about it, right? Change management is really marketing internally of the messaging and the behaviors we want people to follow. And so being mindful, you know, of creating, in marketing speak, like a campaign plan, if you will, just in terms of what are the stories we can tell that, you know, X team, you know, did this, and it was something that we've never done before, you know, and this is what we learned. It should never be one of those like, you know, disingenuous story about, oh, you know, everything was successful, yay, you know, what we do. But it really is about to the point of cultivating the learner's mindset is, what did we learn from the risk that we took? But also helping people understand, and this is very symptomatic of legacy companies too, is, you know, everything has to be like kind of like created to a what might be perfection before it launches. But if it launches and it doesn't do well, all that investment in time, energy, and money would have been for naught. But, you know, when you really think about digital culture, right, it is about iteration. So shifting that mindset, again, back to like change management and messaging, right, is, you know, how do we go into market in the most agile way possible when we're actually learning in the market about our assumptions, about how we might pivot, or about, you know, what are the iterative gaps that, you know, we need to close in order to make this product successful. So you're actually assuming that risk upfront, that to, you know, you're just kind of like diffusing the risk into the life of the project versus assuming all that risk upfront only to go into market later to just kind of like go, oh shoot, you know, we should have X, Y, and Z, but then it's too late and then time has passed. So I would say that, you know, having the projects, having the leadership is going to be important in talking that story.
Matt, your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, just in the last minute real quick. One thing that I did that really helped was I played a game called What Would Get Me Fired? And I think there's so much fear. And in order to play that game, you have to be able to talk the talk, understand what is, you know, the digital marketing skills. You have to have those. Is it, you know, spending $1,000 on Facebook? Is it, you know, and for totally, bonkers campaign that is, terrible? Is it $100,000? Is it $100 million? Like having open and transparent conversations with leadership, because oftentimes leaders feel, gosh, my team doesn't take any risks. And the team feels, I'm really scared to take a risk because I know that my boss doesn't want that. So kind of facilitating those conversations and just aligning on, this is an area you can take a risk, like a Facebook ad. This is an area you cannot take a risk, like consumer safety. So like, here's where you can do that and here's where you should not. And if you have a question about it, feel free to come to me. I think just, creating that dialogue has been really, really helpful for me.
Yeah, that's a great point. So first of all, knowing where the guardrails are, right? So sure, explore your passions, these new initiatives, so on and so forth, but don't do this or else you will get fired. And what I'm also hearing from both of you is this thought that you should prepare now so you can thrive later. And some of the things that you're preparing for, like maybe they'll never come to be, like maybe we'll never have these challenges with data, platforms, so on and so forth, but you don't want to get stuck behind if it does. So making sure your team is ready to do that just in case it does happen, along with also making sure they have the skills of today that are in demand. So thank you, both of you for sharing that information today. I learned a lot. I'm seeing a lot of people chiming in regards to the audience as well. So thank you for this. You will all get a recording directly from General Assembly. I was taking good notes. Hopefully you were as well, but if not, you can go ahead and rewatch it. But I look forward to speaking to you both of you again soon. And thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.